Let me tell you about the devil spring. Hey, what's up guys, and welcome to Dirt Gear TV. Today we're going to be talking about the devil spring. Now some of you may already know what I'm talking about. The rest of you probably know what I'm talking about also. So welcome to the channel. If you haven't been here before, check out our video library. We've got some really cool stuff in there. So behind me here, this is my 2009 300 two-stroke KTM. So we're going to talk a little bit about the red devil spring today and see why this little sucker can get you into serious trouble if you don't know what you're doing. These two-stroke engines, they have what they call a power valve built into these engines. The power valve inside a two-stroke engine manipulates the back pressure coming from your expired exhaust. When you're idling, that power valve is basically in as much of a closed position as it's going to get. It's not fully closed. We don't want to close off the exhaust port. We just want to reduce the size of the exhaust port. So this creates better back pressure at lower RPM and higher flow rate at a higher RPM band. So you kind of get the best of both worlds by using a power valve. So down here at the bottom part of the cylinder is where your power valve springs actually adjust that power valve setting. There are three options. Actually, I think there's more than three. I think there's like 4 or 5 different options from KTM where you can adjust the different spring rate of the power valve. On one end, you've got your hardest spring, which is the green, and then on the other extreme end, you have the red spring. Okay, so you can see the difference between these two springs. It's pretty substantial. This one is significantly firmer than this spring over here, this being the devil spring, the light one. So what we're going to do is we're going to crack open this power valve adjustment. I'm going to show you guys how to install your red spring in these engines. So to remove and change the springs in our power valve, you're going to need a 6mm socket. So we are just going to simply remove these 2 bolts here. Now I suggest when you're doing this, you loosen them both kind of equally. Do like 2 turns on one, switch over to the other, do 2 turns on the other, because you've got several springs that are tensioned behind this, and I don't want to bend any of those springs, so we're just going to do this as uniformly as we can. So once you have your power valve tensioner loose here, you want to pull out the main spring along with the rest of the tensioner. Now, what you do is you're going to separate the main spring, which is this larger spring, and once you pull that off of the tensioner, in the middle of it, there's another spring in the middle of that. That's our power valve spring, the one that we can adjust. So now you can just simply use a screwdriver or something to pop out this little cup off of the end here, and then that's going to give you access to your power valve spring, or in our case, to our devil spring. Now the one I'm currently running, this one is marked yellow. I don't know if you can see the yellow on that or not, but this is the yellow spring. I have the green and I've got the red here. So why would you want to have adjustable power valve springs? What you can do is you can use a yellow spring, or you can use a green spring or blue spring, or a different spring to bring that torque curve down a little bit. So you really do want to be careful when you're switching to a red spring, especially if you're coming from a green spring or one of the lower powered springs. To just drop in the devil spring is going to be a pretty big hit, a dynamite, as soon as you get on the throttle. So guys, use the devil spring with caution. I've only one other time have I run this devil spring on this bike, on the 300 that is. And when I switched it over from a 250 to a 300, I went down to the yellow spring to flatten some of that torque curve, and I've been running it with the yellow spring ever since. There's a reason why it's nicknamed the devil spring and not just the red spring. So I'm going to put the red spring back in, and we're going to take it out to the trail, and we're going to use it a little bit, and I'll give you guys my honest thoughts on the devil spring. First, we're going to remove whatever current spring you're running, the green or the yellow. Then we're going to take our red spring, and we're just going to push that all the way down until it clicks. You want to make sure you've got a nice firm seat on the end of this little cup here. See how there's no gap between the end of the spring and that cup? That's not going to depress any longer. Then what I like to do is I like to take this piece, this assembly, and just drop it down in the middle. And again, we want to push this firm into place until it clicks, until it's seated all the way down. That's really important. Then the way that I do this is, there's a couple different ways that you can do this, but you have to be really careful when you're reinstalling this, because there's a groove inside the engine that actually fits that slot there on the end of this cup. So you have to make sure that that's aligned properly. Let's see if I can get you guys a shot of what that looks like in there. So this is running parallel to the engine. And then I kind of look in and I bring the whole assembly in. So once that cup is fully over the peg, you just want to carefully leave it in position. And then I come in with our tensioner, and we're just going to slowly slide that tensioner on. Now the trick here is that this should not be sticking out very far. The tensioner screws are almost touching the engine case. That's what you want. If you've done this procedure and your tensioner screws are all the way back way out far, then you've made a mistake. So once you're confident that you've got it seated properly, what I do is I'm just going to slowly put pressure on this, line up our screws. These are very fine screws, so make sure you're not stripping these or cross-threading. And then you come in with your 6mm, do like a turn and a half, 2 turns, switch sides. You want to make sure that we're putting even pressure. So it's really important that you don't over tighten these. They're very fine threads, so be careful. Now, once we stand the bike up, if you have any oil that's coming down from the bottom here, that means that you've probably either damaged your gasket on the back side of the tensioner. So just be mindful, be checking that after you've done this to make sure that you don't have any oil that's leaking outside of the tensioner or the crank. Okay, so now that we've got our red spring installed, let me tell you a little bit about this tensioner. Remember when I was showing you the assembly, there was 2 springs in there. There was a large spring and then the small spring which we replaced. This is a tensioner for that larger spring. And what that does is that allows the initial power band to come on. So it's not going to change the total amount of power. All it's doing is it's shifting where that power starts to apply and what part of the RPM band range. So a good way to kind of get an initial setting is I recommend that you start with this flush. You can see how this thread is just kind of flush with the outside of the tensioner. Start there and then ride the bike, and as you ride it, you can progressively turn this in a 1/4 turn at a time, and what you're doing is you're raising that RPM band where that kicks in. And you can just kind of play around with that, get a good setting what's comfortable for you. Personally, the way that I've had this set that's really comfortable for me is 1.5 turns in from flush. So once we're flush here, we're just going to go back to where we had it. I'm going to go 1/2, 1, and 1/2. Okay, so that works well for me. You guys can mess around with that to get a good setting for you. So you don't want to go too far in and you really don't want to go too far out. You really need to have it adjusted somewhere within about 2 turns in or out from where that flush position is. Again, I like mine about 1.5. So let's go hit the trails, guys, and I'll give you some honest feedback as I'm riding this bike for the first time with the Devil Spring in years, and let you guys know what I think about it.
All right, guys, well, let's give this red spring a rip, shall we? So it's been a while since I've been on the old KTM here, so my riding skills are not quite at the level that they normally are, so you guys will need to give me a pass on that. But in any event, we're going to be testing out this red spring here and see why it is these things are dangerous and why you should fear the Devil Spring. Not only have I not been on this bike for a while, but it's been years since I've run the red spring. Makes kind of an uncertain combination going on here. For a lot of riders, that's why we love two-stroke so much. It's because of that explosive two-stroke power. As you guys can see, most of the riding that I do here in Florida is very, very sandy. This is deep sugar sand. You can absolutely get used to riding in sand, no problem, and once you get used to it, there's actually some pretty cool benefits from riding in the sand. Alright, so red spring in. Let's see what she does. Oh, that's a car over there. Alright, we'll just have to find another trail, guys. Look out, bird. I got a 300 two-stroke with a Devil Spring coming through. Yip, yip, yip. Oh, yes. There it is. This engine really needs a good flogging. She's starting to get warm now. Woohoo! So this engine hasn't been run in a while, so it is kind of breaking in a little bit. Oops. Sorry guys. Alright guys, so we're going to get back at it here because we're losing light. Alright, so my thoughts on the red spring. Hot dog, this thing is fun. A little crazy. A little scary, but fun, no doubt. The red spring is a contender. Woo! It's got that 50 horsepower explosion to it. I've ridden a two-stroke, so I keep forgetting to shift, but as soon as I shift into third, it's spinning the tire even faster than the top of second. I could shift into fourth and it would just burn the back tire off. It's an experience, guys. If you haven't run the double spring before, you're going to have to give it a try, especially if you ride a 300. It's something else, man. You guys enjoyed this video, do me a favor, hit that like button. I know you probably are sick of hearing that from all these YouTubers. Hit the like, subscribe. I'm not going to tell you to subscribe because if you like my content, you're going to subscribe anyway, but I will tell you to hit the like button. I have to be reminded myself from time to time. Hey, look out. Guys, I can't say thank you enough to those of you that have subscribed over the last year to the channel. Leave positive comments. I can't tell you how much I appreciate that stuff. By the way, guys, I kind of forgot to explain this picture right here. This is a real injury that happened to me in this very parking lot, actually in this very spot, on this very bike, a couple years ago. Just trying to practice my clutch-up wheelies, just being stupid. And I had just taken my gloves off. I had landed a few, I was, confident, everything was going smooth. I was like, I'll just, do it one more before I load it up in the truck. You always know that that's when you're gonna get yourself in trouble. You're like, I didn't get hurt, so just do one more here. If you could have seen what both of my hands looked like, the worst part about that day was not the injury. I didn't go to the hospital or anything. I'm just kind of stubborn about that stuff, so all I did was go home and bandage it up. But I actually had a presentation that I had to do for a group of about 25 people that night. And then the following week, I actually went out to a convention in Dallas. Here I am, like, dressed to the nines, like, giving speeches and stuff in front of people, and I'm like bleeding through my dress clothes. People are asking me why my hands are bandaged up like mummies. I look like a complete idiot. I just didn't have the humility, I guess, to share with anybody that I was being stupid on a dirt bike the day before the convention. So anyway, that's all I got for you guys today. That's the Devil Spring. Hope you guys enjoyed it. I recommend you try it. Just be cautious after you do, because you're going to get a hit of power that you haven't had before if you haven't run a Devil Spring. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next video.